Okay, hello everyone. This is another study on the social approach. That is the study of Saavedra and Silverman on button phobia. Okay, let's dive into it. Now, we have different kinds of phobia. So describe your phobia. What do you fear? What is your fear? Do you like heights? Do you like blood? Do you like seeing blood? Do you like um, being in the crowd? Describe your phobia. What is your phobia? All right. So, what do you fear? Do you fear cockroaches, spiders, snakes, sea, that lot of things around that? Okay. Um, yeah, phobia. What is phobia? Phobia is the rational and persistent fear of an object or event which poses little danger but creates anxiety and avoidance in the sufferer. Okay, so phobia can actually create fear. Okay, but it is irrational. Okay, it is irrational because the thing can actually pose little danger. All right, look at, for example, this. Yeah, the difference between fear and phobia is that this now, if you're scared of this, and then you're scared of this, now this is fear because it's going to be logical. Like looking at this shark now, it's a big shark. You can actually kill the human. You see this thing coming, it can actually eat the human. All right, but then being scared of this particular one actually is a phobia because it's irrational. Looking at this little dog here, it can bite, and even if it can bite, it can hurt as much. It only poses little danger, but the way you avoid it now determines if it's just a normal thing or if it's a phobia. All right. Now, disgust has often been referred to as the overlooked emotion in psychiatry. A specific phobia referred to a diagnosis of individuals who experienced intense fear, okay, or anxiety when faced with certain stimuli. Now, disgust is hypothesized to interact with fear, potentially amplifying avoidance behavior. Okay, now, how do people develop phobia? All right, so these are not necessarily part of the study, but it's not a bad thing if you get to have an idea around them already, because we're still going to talk about some psychoanalytic theories in the clinical psychology. All right, and then other factors. Okay, so for the psychoanalytic, we have the id, you have the ego, and then the superego. All right, so what does this explain? According to this theory, phobias are based on anxiety reaction of the id that have been repressed by the ego. In other words, the currently fear object is not the original subject of fear. So, for example, fear of this. Now, id now craves excitement from risky activity, like climbing tall trees. Now, id is actually your instinct to do, let me say, to do crazy things. You want to do this, you want to do that. Okay, you're walking around a particular tall building, and then the idea is coming to you: jump, 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 try it, jump. Look at how it is. Okay, now the super ego now is more like the angel trying to warn you, citing a lot of morals. Okay, don't do this because it's going to lead to this. Okay, don't do that, this is not good. If you jump, don't forget you can fly. Right, things around that. Now ego on the other hand is not the one that struggles to balance things, where you eventually take your decision. All right, it struggles to balance things between the id and the ego. All right, the id wants to jump, for example. The super ego is reminding you of the possible danger. Okay, so the id now struggles to balance things with the moral fear, leading to a phobia, all right, as a defense mechanism to avoid the conflict. All right, so in order to avoid the conflict, according to Freud's theory on psychoanalysis, the process of trying to balance things, okay, you're not trying to avoid such thought. You are trying to avoid those um the fight. I mean, these are things that actually happen. Okay, you just think about crazy things. So in order to avoid those things, you begin to develop the fear. Okay, begin to develop the fear for it. Okay, that you don't want to be in that situation where you have to think of jumping, and then you have to think of the consequences. You don't just want that. All right. So what is the result? The rational fear of height helps the ego prevent internal tension between the id and the superego. Okay. What about the learning based aspect of it? We're talking about the positive reinforcement and negative reinforcement. Okay. So the learning theory suggests that phobias develop through reinforcement or punishment of fear responses. Okay. Positive reinforcement when you scream at a dog. Okay. Gains parental. Sorry. Okay, yeah, screaming at a dog gains parental comfort. All right. So when you scream, all right, you gain this kind of comfort, um, this kind of satisfaction within you. All right. So, for example, over time, that can actually lead to fear of dogs. Negative reinforcement, avoiding dogs just to reduce anxiety, and then over time it becomes fear. Okay. Um, Another one, positive punishment. Approaching a dog leads to a scratch. Okay, so you approach the dog and then you actually you you got a little punishment from it. All right. Okay, and then you learn to fear dog because of that, just because of that single experience. Okay. Now another one is the negative punishment. All right, negative punishment. Avoiding dog causes loss of playtime. All right. So, don't forget negative punishment. You're trying to um, remove something. You're trying to discourage the behavior. Okay. So avoiding dog, it causes loss of playtime. So the more you avoid dogs, all right. Oh, please wait. Let me process that again. Um. Okay. Okay. All right. So yeah, you're avoiding dogs, and then it leads to loss of playtime. So the process of engaging in this actually causes you to just feel that okay, everything about this dog is just irritating. I don't want them. Okay, they actually cost me a lot of things. Okay, now result reinforcement and punishment strengthen the fear response. All right. So that's according to learning based. What about biological aspect? All right, genetics and brain damage. The medical model of psychology proposed that mental disorders stem from physiological factors. Okay, talking about the body structures. Okay, emphasizing neuropsychology, a field focused on studying the brain structure and function. Now, fear of height, for example, physiological factor could be that okay, overreactivity in the amygdala, that is the part responsible for controlling our emotion. Okay, the brain reach. Okay, okay, yeah, overreactivity. If it's too sensitive, then we can have a phobia. All right, neuropsychology focused brain imaging showed increased amygdala activities when exposed to height related stimuli, linking the phobia to brain function. All right, so when you see that, have that sight, and then there is high increased activity in the amygdala, then it can lead to that. Okay, so the medical model attribute acrophobia, which is fear of heights, to physiological abnormalities. Okay, now, another aspect is classical conditioning. All right, here we're going to dwell a little. Now, classical conditioning, also called the Pavlovian conditioning, was done. It was created by Pavlov. Okay, it's learning through association, discovered by a Russian psychologist Pavlov. Okay, it involved linking two stimuli to create a new learned response. Okay, we're going to talk about it in this study. Now, John Watson also did a study using the Little Albert experiment. All right, so John Watson suggested that classical conditioning, okay, could explain every aspect of human psychology, talking about human behavior. All right, he argued that behavior, including speech and emotion, were patterned to stimulus and response. That was his belief system. Okay, Watson denied the existence of the mind, that people's mind are not necessarily active, but then they were passive. Okay, he believed that individual behavior differences stemmed entirely from unique learning experience. So which means that how you've learned to associate one behavior with another, these are the factors that are responsible for your behavior. Okay. Now, what is classical conditioning? Let's look at it in detail. We have before conditioning, what happens. In this stage, we have what is known as unconditioned stimulus. Okay, which promotes unconditioned response. Okay, what is unconditioned stimulus? All right, these are stimulus that naturally yield a particular behavior in us. Just like when we spoke about the dog. When the dog sees food, the dog actually salivates. So food is unconditioned stimulus that can produce unconditioned response, which is salivating in an organism. Essentially, a stimulus in the environment causes an unlearned, unconditioned response. Okay, it's a natural reaction. All right. Now, that is before condition. Now, during condition, you're going to have another. Okay, in this stage, the neutral stimulus that initially produced no response, there is something called also neutral stimulus, which if you introduce it to anything, the neutral stimulus has no reaction. Okay, for example, you blow a whistle in front of a dog, it has no reaction. It doesn't mean anything to the dog, right? Okay. For example, you for Watson actually use a cat. Okay, you give a baby little Albert a cat. Little Albert doesn't have any reaction for the cat. All right, the cat is just a neutral stimulus. So neutral stimulus is not producing any result. Okay, but eventually when that neutral stimulus is paired with something, okay, let's say for example the dog that I was mentioning earlier, or I mentioned earlier, the dog naturally salivates with food. Now when you introduce um, a whistle, which Pavlov did, when you try to blow a whistle, whistle doesn't have any effect with the dog. So whistle is a neutral stimulus. Now, but when you pair whistle and food now, whistle and food can now lead to still the same salivating. All right. You might think that, okay, yeah, it's just the food um, that is initiating the salivating that the activity the dog is doing, not necessarily the whistle. Yeah, you're right. But over time, the dog learned to pair the food and the whistle together to a point that if the dog sees only the whistle or hear only the whistle, it begins to salivate. So that is the process of learning. Learning has taken place then. All right. So eventually, now the neutral stimulus that has been paired with unconditioned stimulus now, both neutral stimulus plus unconditioned, we now give a new stimulus, which is the conditioned stimulus. So that is the process here. All right. So I believe it's understood. Moving forward now, after conditioning, the conditioned stimulus now is producing conditioned response. Okay, conditioned response is now the salivating that is still maintained. Okay, the whistle alone, which has transformed from a natural stimulus now, it has now become a conditioned stimulus. All right, the salivating has now changed from unconditioned response. It has now become a conditioned response. It's still salivating, but whistle alone now can be used to make the dog salivate. All right. Now, the psychology being investigated in this study, we have classical conditioning, a learning process where a neutral stimulus becomes associated with unconditioned stimulus to produce a conditioned response. Now, phobia, on the other hand, an intense irrational fear of specific object or situation that significantly affect our life. And then another one is evaluative learning, a form of learning where an emotion responds, either positive or negative, to a stimulus is influenced by prior experience or association. All right, you're able to evaluate, to judge particular stimulus or a particular activity based on your past experience. No, now looking at classical conditioning, again, the example according to Pavlov. All right, there's this video here. Let me just flip through it. All right, this is the video talking about, yeah, this is the dog, that's the buzzer. All All right, you sound the buzzer and then the dog begins to salivate. All right, you can check some of these videos online. They are everywhere for you to be able to understand unconditioned response, conditioned stimulus, okay, neutral stimulus, condition stimulus now, and conditioned response. Okay, so we have a lot of videos around that online. Okay, for conditioning, you have the unconditioned stimulus. Okay, the response, the dog salivates when it sees this. Okay, now this is before conditioning. Okay, now this is the loud bell. The response for the loud bell, the dog doesn't do anything. What are you doing? It has no impact. Okay, no neutral stimulus produce no response. Okay, unconditioned stimulus produce unconditioned response. Okay, now during conditioning, the bell now plus this unconditioned stimulus plus natural stimulus will still produce this behavior of salivating. You pair this and this. All right, so what happens after? It produces unconditioned response, same response, this plus this. Now when you take the food away, what will happen? The bell alone now will now produce this behavior, conditioned response. So the bell has changed now from neutral stimulus to conditioned stimulus, and this has changed from no unconditioned response to conditioned response. Okay, so the story of the little old bat. All right, so I won't be mentioning this here. Okay, you can check my other videos. You will get the understanding of the story of the little old bat. All right, so this is the video. All right, yeah, by Watson. All right, now trying to create the loud sound for the little Albert. Okay, a rat was introduced, and then the sound. So you can check my other videos to get my explanation on that. So, okay, now you make the loud sound. This is the rat. The baby is not scared of the rat. It wants to play with it. Right? Now you make the loud sound. The baby cries. Now you pair the loud sound and the rat. The baby cries. Now just seeing the rat again. Now only the rat. The rat that doesn't have any effect on the baby. The rat, because it has been paired with a loud sound, the rat now has effect on the baby, making the baby cry. Because the stimulus has been paired. Okay. Now, expectancy and evaluative learning. Example. Now, look at this. You're trying to ride your bicycle. I wonder what will happen if I put this if I put the stick through the wheel. Okay, you're riding and then you put the stick through the wheel. What do you expect to happen? Obviously, you fall, right? Okay, so the person fell. Oh, I'm not doing that again. All right. Looking forward to future danger. I wonder what will happen if I put the stick through the wheel. Okay, in this situation. Now look at the rest. The ideas. I hate bikes. Now this can be a phobia that will be based on the outcome. All right. People can develop phobia or fear for something because of future expectation. Yeah, I don't want to be in an environment where there is a dog because there is an expectation that something bad might happen. That is expectancy learning. All right, the other one is evaluative learning. You just hate, you added your emotion to it. It's no longer based on expectation. Now maybe you look at something. If you're in a place and you okay, maybe try to analyze this. If you have phobia for a dog, why do you think you have phobia for a dog? It might be due to your past memory, and then you think around the fact that dogs can bite, dogs can also be um, harsh, or let me say aggressive at some point. Okay, so basically because of that, you now have phobia for dogs. Okay, as a result, you try to avoid them. So in that situation, you might not necessarily want to see a dog because you're you're expecting something um, harmful to you. All right, so you can develop phobia even if you see a small dog that will not necessarily harm you. All right, now think of this situation. What do you think about Maybe something like cockroach. Is it because cockroach has actually harmed anyone before that? Maybe some people are trying to avoid it. What do you think? It's actually because of evaluative learning. They've come to uh, have this disgust feeling for it. All right. So it's similar to the experience of this person here. All right. This bike made you fall. And then the next thing, you actually hate bike. All right. It becomes irritating to you. You're trying so much to avoid them. Okay. Evaluating backwards to something that happened. All right. Now, evaluative learning, this is the same as classical conditioning, but with a cognitive element also. So not only is the subject conditioned to a negative consequence, but also attaching a negative emotion to the positive outcome. So there is that emotion you're attaching to it. All right. Now, past study, all right, this negative evaluation elicit disgust rather than fear. Okay. Now, the Jung et al. Discovered that children with spider phobia, their disgust reduced alongside fear reduction. So it's possible to reduce disgust. Okay, now Hepburn and Page, 1999, adults with blood phobia, targeting disgust help them to reduce their phobia. Okay, now what is the research gap? Disgust and evaluating learning are insufficiently covered in the child psychiatric literature. So this study now examines classical conditioning in regards to fear and stimulus avoidance. Now, okay, so they were basically trying to examine classical conditioning, all right, which means pairing two things together, all right. Okay, another one is to find whether exposure therapy would reduce disgust and avoidance towards button in the case of a boy with button phobia. We have a boy in the study with button phobia now. Okay, so looking at this video, all right, our phobia has been developed. Okay, all right. So in the case of the study, all right, it's a story of a particular boy, a 9-year-old boy, who was working with his peers in the classroom. All right, and at some point, the teacher he needed to get something on the teacher's table, so he moved to the teacher's table, and then there is this bunch of buttons that fell on the boy, so it was really disgusting. Yeah, so the boy saw it, found it disgusting, and then ran away. You know, he doesn't want to see the button afterwards. He doesn't want to see any button afterwards. It became distressing to actually wear his uniform with buttons on. Very distressing, so he couldn't do it anymore. All right. So it became a problem. The boy was 5 years old. That's at a point in time, so he was avoiding button at all cost. All right. So there was this feeling thermometer that the boy had to use to rate his level of disgust. Okay. 9 scale. Okay, but it's actually from 0 to 8. All right. So the least ones. Okay, you can see the ones at the bottom were the large buttons, and then the ones above were the small buttons that the boy had to rate. Okay, so he found the smaller buttons very disgusting, very distressing for him. You can see the picture of the boy trying to cry there, whereas the bigger buttons were the ones with least distress. Okay, so behavior exposure therapy, which was the first one, the boy was exposed to the button gradually, and then the mother had to praise the boy after each successful trial. Okay, but so the boy was able to touch the button, you can see, but however, his level of distress also increased. His heart was beating faster, you know. Okay, so that became a problem. All right, they had to use another method, which is the imagery exposure therapy. That is, the boy had to imagine, okay, you're seated, and then you had to imagine, excuse me, a lot of buttons, okay, in your mind. You just have to imagine them. All right, and yeah, you just have to imagine them. So in the process of imagining them, you have to describe what do you feel, what do you smell, what is the texture maybe of the button, all right, and then you describe your emotion. All right, so that was the activity the boy had to do, just to imagine it. All right, so over time, he was able to overcome a study. So expectancy learning failed, all right, but evaluative learning worked in the sense that while trying to describe his feelings, so the boy was able to go through the process and understand that, okay, the button is actually not as disgusting as they felt. All right, so this video is actually important. It's very good. It's very nice. You can check it up online. All right. Okay, so the research method, the experiment was a case study with data collected through self-report. All right, so it was a self-report, and the boy and his mother were interviewed beforehand to explore the origin of his phobia. All right, so there was an interview. Since it's a case study, you can use different methods. All right, so treatment results were assessed using the feeling thermometer, okay, from a scale of 0 to 8. All right, so 0 to 8, we give you a 9-point scale. Let's count. 0 to 8. 0 will be the first scale, okay. 1 will be 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. All right, so 0 will be the first one. You can choose 0, you can choose these. So you have 9 different options here. All right, so and it's rated 0 to 8, which will help the boy to rate his level of disgust. 0 will be okay, I'm okay with it, there is no issue, it's not distressing for me. But if it's very distressing extremely, you can rate it 8. Okay, so the boy might not be able to fully express, okay, how disgusting these buttons are, but there was a method that was used. All right, now the participant was a 9-year-old Hispanic American boy recruited from the Child Anxiety and Phobia program at Florida International University. Okay, he had been experiencing button phobia symptoms for approximately 4 years before the study. So which means it started when it was 5, now it's 9. He was going through this therapy. So ethic, there was informed consent taken from the mother as well as from the boy. Okay, mother gave written consent for write-up and publication. This is good for the sake of others who want to benefit from such study. Okay, so the background, when the boy was 5 years old, I mentioned that earlier. All right, he ran out of button from a poster board, and then he ran to the teacher's desk to get some buttons. The buttons fell on him. All right, so it led to distress and then avoidance of buttons in his daily life, excessive preoccupation, difficulty concentrating, cannot dress himself anymore. Okay, physiological check, they ensure that, okay, the phobia the boy has for button was not because of other events such as physical or sexual abuse, accident, or other significant traumas, and then it wasn't OCD. All right, for the procedure before the treatment, a hierarchy was made, and then the boy had to use 11 items ranging from different kinds of buttons. Okay, large denim jean buttons, small denim jean buttons. These are jean buttons. They are generally big though. Okay, but jean button, they are somehow metallic. Oh, yes, somehow metallic. All right, clip-on denim jean button, and then we have the large plastic button, large plastic clear. Hugging mom when she's putting on large plastic buttons, medium. Okay, so now the smaller the button, you can see the smaller the button, the higher the distress. So small buttons were very distressful for the boy. Okay, medium button were averagely distressful. Okay, and then the large ones around this area were least distressing. Okay, now the point here is this. I've seen question around this before where it was asked in the AS that, okay, give 2 examples of the stimuli that were rated above 5, okay, during the study of Saavedra, Silverman, etc. Like that, okay? So you have to understand that, okay, above 5, we have small plastic clear button, small plastic colored button, again, mom when she's putting on medium size, medium plastic buttons, okay, etc. All right. So this was used, which helps the boy to be able to rate the thing that, oh, it's very distressing, or it's least distressing, oh, I think I'm okay with this. So at least the boy can familiarize with this and be able to accurately choose the emotion he was feeling by using this kind of familiar cartoons. All right. Now you can see it's written like the small buttons were the most distressing, and then the big buttons were the least distressing. Okay. So there's another concept which is called systematic desensitization. Let me just explain that. Okay, we have the in vitro. All right, in vitro is when you use um you don't use the real object. Okay, look at this lady having phobia for spider. All right, you're using just the picture of a spider here. All right, the lady had to hold the picture of the spider. All right, the experimenter is holding the plastic spider now attached to a rope. Okay, the experimenter is holding the plastic spider, and then the patient is able to hold the plastic spider, not the real spider now. All right, these are all steps in the in vitro because you're not using the real stimuli or the stimulus. Okay, now in this situation, this is the real spider in an enclosure. All right, this is the real one, and then these are all in vivo. Now the experimenter here is holding the real spider until the patient is able to hold the spider himself or herself. All right. So this is a way of exposing the person to the stimuli. Another method is flooding. You just keep the person in the environment where the phobic object is present. That can be very distressing, you know. Okay, so two types of therapy were introduced. Number one is uh, contingency therapy, and then the other one, the second one is imagery exposure therapy, where the boy has to imagine. Okay, now for the behavioral therapy, which is the contingency therapy, all right, it involves imagery exposure intervention, where this situation, sorry, let me take it again. Okay, the treatment involves contingency management and imagery exposure intervention. All right, now 1-4 session. Okay, the contingency management used an in vivo technique. Okay, in vivo in the sense that you expose the participants to the real thing. Okay, the boy had to touch the button himself. Okay, moving down the hierarchy all the way from the least distressing button down to the um, most distressing stimuli that the boy rated using the thermometer. All right. So, and then while doing that, he was receiving the mother's affection, mother's praise and rewards in the process to encourage him. Okay. So, treatment session lasted for 30 minutes with the boy and then 20 minutes with both the boy and his mother. All right. What was the result? When treated with this method, the boy's distress rating on the thermometer became higher. So, this was a problem. Okay. Now, look at it. So, numbers of buttons manipulated. All right. Now, different sessions and then the level of severity. So, the level of severity is supposed to be moving down, but rather it's actually going up. Okay. So, the boy was able to manipulate really all the way from 5 to 10 to this. But however, this level of severity was not dropping. Eventually, the level of the pulse rate, the heartbeat keeps moving high at this point. So, okay, so which means that despite the fact that the boy was able to touch the button, he was still scared. Like he was touching it because he felt he needed to, but he was still scared of doing that. All right. So the behavioral approach was not working. Now, the treatment of visualization was the cognitive approach that they needed to do. Right? The boy had to imagine the button, okay, which is the imagery exposure. All right. Forming the basis for imagery exposure. Now, over 7 sessions, the boy imagined 7 imagine buttons falling on him. Now, he has to describe the appearance, the texture, and the smell of the button, while also discussing his emotional reaction. What does he feel like doing? To run, to be calm, okay, whatever. Now, the imagery exposure started with larger button, which are the least distressing, and then gradually moved to smaller ones. The boy was encouraged to use self-control and cognitive strategies during the therapy. Okay, so yeah, imagery therapy is good. Okay, so therapy now are turning to virtual reality therapists. Okay, because with this you can be able to control what the person really have to uh, imagine in his brain. Okay, compared to just telling the boy to imagine this and then guiding him on how to go about it. All right, so virtual reality can be uh, more standardized. Okay, so what was the result? After the exposure therapy, the boy's rating of distress decreased. Okay, that is good. All right, it decreased from 8 now all the way to somewhere around 5 and then somewhere around 3. So items that were rated 8 initially dropped to 5 midway around the middle, and then eventually after the exposure therapy, after the image exposure imagination, all right, it dropped down to 3. Okay, follow up after 6 months and after 12 months, it was still effective. Assessment session to see whether the therapy was effective. The boy reported feeling minimal distress about button, just feel distress. Now, he no longer met the DSM criteria for specific phobia, which means he doesn't have phobia anymore. I mean, according to this is a diagnostic tool to determine if someone has phobia or not. But according to, after giving him this questionnaire to fill or this form to fill, it was his results showed that he wasn't having button phobia anymore. Okay, now he was able to wear clear plastic button on a school uniform shirt. Okay, so conclusion: emotion and cognition related to disgust play a crucial role in learning and relearning responses to phobic stimuli. So emotion and then our cognition, how we feel, right, and how we think around it, our imagination. Uh, the ones related to disgust are important when we are trying to learn responses or when we're trying to relearn responses that are related to phobic stimuli. Oh, I think I was trying to be very fast so the video won't be too long. Okay, so imagery exposure can have a lasting positive effect on reducing distress. Okay, even after 6 months and 12-month follow up. Okay, so moving to the evaluation, it wasn't an experiment, it was rather a case study. So, what is good about a case study? A case study is good because you get detailed information, detailed analysis, right? That is quite good. Okay, what else do you get from case studies? Um, since there is in-depth analysis, you're able to uh, understand great, or let me say, a lot of information. And look at the situation. They were able to try even two different methods. The first one did not work, and then the second one eventually produced a good result. So that is good. All right. However, what is not good about a case study? Um, yeah, you can find that in other things. All right. The kind of data that was gotten, you got quantitative and qualitative data. So the responses of the boy using the thermometer was quantitative by rating. Okay, this is 9, this is 7, this is 6, this is 4. All right. So that is quantitative. All right. It is objective, although to some extent it is still subjective. All right. But it is believed to be um, objective. All right. It is good. Okay. However, the boy trying to describe his emotion, all right, during the imagery exposure therapy. Now there is a little problem, okay, because that is a qualitative data. So the boy could have been subjective, he could have been just trying to act out of the situation. Okay, yeah, I'm fond of the therapist already, and I know what they want. There could be demand characteristics there. Okay, all right. So also, but then the fact that the boy was still able to describe his emotion given the opportunity to do that, that shows in-depth information at least. Be able to know what the boy was feeling. Is he working or not? Now, validity is still good. Okay, there was standardization. You were able to standardize certain aspect of it. All right, trying to standardize the thought process in the mind of the boy as much as possible. Imagined this button. Okay, that was instruction, given clear cut instruction. Describe your emotion, describe the smell, the texture, all right, of the button, all right. So all those things are to increase the validity, to ensure that there is standardization, all right. Okay, what else? What else? What else? Okay, now for the sample, it was just one boy, so it is very low. Generalizability is low. It is very hard um, to generalize case studies because different people might react different ways. Okay, excuse me. Now for ethics, what can we say about ethic? Ethic is fairly good. All right, there was informed consent. There was um what else? What else? Informed consent. There was okay. They taught the boy to exercise self-control. Okay, to protect him from harm and some other things. Okay. However, the entire therapy was distressing. Okay, because it involves the use of the phobic stimuli or stimulus rather that the boy was scared of. Okay, so it was stressful. All right. Aha. Another thing about the data is regarding the quantitative data using the 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 severity rate. Okay, measuring the severity rate using the pulse rate to measure that. Okay, so that is fairly objective. It's good. Okay, now using the grave to evaluate generalizability, the study was low because it was just one person. All right, and then it was just a single type of phobia. You can generalize this method to other kinds of phobia. All right, what about reliability? Okay, the study's reliability is good because there was standardized measure. Okay, feeling thermometer was standardized. All right, they also use DSM-5 to make sure his button phobia actually fits the criteria of being a phobia. Okay, that was a form of standardization as well. However, it was not a lab or field experiment. To be argued that the reliability is subjective. That is, the boy could have gotten fond of the experimenter or the other, and could have gotten fond of the boy. There could be some personal interpretation, um, some biases that was exercised in the procedure, things around that. Okay, what about application to real life? Okay, now it supports the idea that imaginal desensitization rather than in vivo therapies, phobia involving disgust. Okay, it also shows that disgust needs to be taken into account when treating phobia. Okay, so generally, I think this can be useful to parents and maybe their younger children trying to um, express phobia for certain stimuli. Take for example, your child is scared of water. Instead of exposing the child to the water itself, you can start gradually by actually making the child imagine the water and then using um, in vitro instead of in vivo. Maybe watching movies or cartoons where there are swimming pools. Okay, things like that gradually over time until the boy or the child is comfortable with the thing. All right. So validity, all right, validity is high in the study. It was a case study, and the boy was studied over a long period of time. So it was good. Shows that the therapy was actually effective, not just for immediacy purpose, but even after a very long period of time. Okay, quantitative and qualitative data were collected. Improvement was demonstrated and based on specific treatments. Now, ecological validity, all right, is high because it took place in the therapist office, and then they made use of the phobic object itself. So they used the button itself. So that is quite good, which means that even after the the therapist, when the boy moves outside, is able to touch the button in real life because they actually use the button itself in the study. So what about ethic? Ethic was good. There was informed consent from mother and from the boy. That is good. Okay. Uh, However, it was stressful for the boy. Okay. It was a very stressful therapy. Okay. Which means protection from harm was broken. Okay. But however, it is actually good because it's worth it as far as the boy was able to overcome his phobia. Okay. Now, other consideration, there could be bias to successfully complete a case study, meaning building a relationship with the subjects. Yeah. So, which means there could be a level of subjectivity over time. Demand characteristics too. The boy already knows what is expected. So, over time, he could pattern his behavior to actually meet the expectations of the experimenter. Okay. Yeah. My reference, Mr. Gregory Online, and then Mr. Stevenson Ross, another YouTuber. Okay. That's it. Thank you very much. My name is Paul Adebi. All right. So, um, please do subscribe to my YouTube channel. All right.